In my past life, I married Shen Yan, and everyone envied me for landing such a good match. Shen Yan rose to fame at a young age, then climbed steadily to the top implementing new policies, becoming Grand Secretary, assisting the young emperor, wielding power over the entire court. But that glory belonged to Shen Yan alone. No one knew the bitterness I harbored behind those grand gates. Reborn into this life, when Shen Yan's fame spread across the land, I packed my belongings, wrote a divorce letter, and sat outside our home with a beaming smile, waiting for him. Congratulations on your great achievement, my lord. I request to step down from this marriage. Parting ways will bring ease to us both. The naval battle in the southeast was won. This war had lasted a full 3 years. When the news reached the capital, His Majesty was overjoyed. In this campaign, Shen Yan, though a civil official, repeatedly achieved remarkable feats. Now, even before the army had returned, and though it wasn't a festival, the palace sent down several dishes, reportedly His Majesty's personal favorites. The intention was obvious. The Shen family joyfully received the rewards. During casual conversation at the table, my mother-in-law brought up her close friend Lady Wang. Her daughter-in-law, inconvenienced by pregnancy last year, had proactively taken in 2 concubines for her husband. Now she'd given birth to twins, and one concubine was also pregnant. What a harmonious family they were. My mother-in-law's underlying meaning was nothing more than this. I had been married to Shen Yan for 5 years without bearing a single child. But Shen Yan had been gone for 3 years without coming home. Even if I wanted to bear children, how exactly was I supposed to? Before I could respond, my sister-in-law chimed in over there, saying that Princess Pingyang had invited her to go flower viewing together. Princess Pingyang is spoiled and arrogant, rarely deigning to look anyone in the eye. Shen Yan is strikingly handsome. When word came of him topping the imperial examination, the princess was still young, but a single distant glance was enough to plant the seeds of love. Now that Shen Yan is about to return, she has probably stirred up those feelings again. The princess is of noble birth and could greatly benefit Shen Yan's career, naturally not something I can compare to. But if she were to enter the Shen household, how could she possibly lower herself to be a concubine? This is my predicament. Mother-in-law certainly won't consider things from my perspective. The moment she heard about the princess's invitation, mother-in-law smiled so wide her eyes disappeared. She ordered the maid beside her to get 2 more sets of jewelry, made for Shen Lin, the Shen family. Absolutely mustn't be looked down upon. She also had someone bring out a pot of purple chrysanthemums she'd been personally tending, planning to gift it to the princess. I am Shen Yan's wedded wife. If only he'd shown me a bit of care, sent a couple more letters, mother-in-law wouldn't dare mistreat me. Too bad he didn't. This is how I've spent 5 years in the Shen household. Mother-in-law dislikes me. My husband is indifferent, and I have no children. The only one I can rely on is myself. Shen Yan has made it big now. He is the emperor's favorite. Wherever I go, people respectfully address me as Madam Shen. Shen Yan doesn't take concubines, doesn't visit brothels, devotes himself entirely to state affairs, and reached 3rd-rank office at such a young age. All the girls in the capital envy me for landing such a fine marriage. After all, for such a brilliant talent like him, even if he didn't marry a princess of royal blood, he should at least be matched with a lady from a prestigious noble family. In any case, not someone like me, the daughter of a county deputy. But few people know that when I married Shen Yan back then, it was actually considered marrying down. Shen Yan and I had a long-standing engagement, arranged by the elders of both families when they were still alive. It is just that by the time Shen Yan came to our door with the marriage contract, the Shen family had long since fallen into decline. Me father wasn't pleased, but my mother was more open-minded, saying it didn't matter if the husband's family was of lower status. Rather than being a decorative accessory in some high noble house, it was better to have a powerful maiden family backing you up and marry in as the mistress of the household without being bullied. Once my mother had spoken, my father finally relented. But since it was marrying down, our Su family naturally had to set some conditions. The first condition was no taking concubines. Back then, my mother-in-law treated me just as she treats Princess Pingyang now. On the surface, she didn't make a single excuse and hurriedly agreed. When Shenyan went to the capital for the imperial examinations, it was our Su family who provided the travel expenses. My father also personally wrote letters, asking several of his former classmates in the capital to look after him. My father and mother considered every little thing for me, but they overlooked just one thing: Shenyan was simply too capable. It only took him 10 years to go from a complete nobody to wielding power over the entire court. Everything my father and mother did back then became nothing but humiliations to him. Shenyan kept his word and never took a concubine his entire life, but throughout his life, he remained utterly cold and distant toward me. I was like an extra piece of furniture in his room. Even the sparrows flying across the sky were far more interesting than me. I was the youngest daughter in the family, always spoiled by my parents. They didn't hide their various considerations about Shenyan from me. Too bad I was naive back then, not understanding that one man's poison is another man's honey. I married Shenyan with a heart full of joy. What woman in the world doesn't start out hoping for a happy and fulfilling life? Back then, he studied hard in his study, not returning until late at night. He said he was afraid I'd disturb him and wouldn't let me bring him meals. So I endured the pain of longing and lit a lamp at home every night to light his way back. Only later did I learn that the other scholars studying with Shenyan all had their wives bring them meals. Shenyan wasn't afraid of being disturbed. He just didn't want to see me. He'd rather eat rice soaked in plain water. Shenyan started being nice to me after I got pregnant. It was the 6th year of our marriage when I became pregnant. After court, he would come to my room to see me. My pregnancy was always unstable, and I threw up terribly. Only 2 months in, I was already so thin I barely looked human. Shenyan held a small bowl of tender braised boneless meat and fed me the minced meat, one small bite at a time. Strangely enough, I only kept down what Shenyan fed me. Back then, I really thought life was going to get better. We were like the most ordinary couple in the world, discussing names for the child. He'd name a boy, I'd name a girl. Too bad heaven always loves playing jokes on me. That child was miscarried in the 3rd month. Shenyan's kindness toward me also came to an abrupt end. Me mother-in-law openly and subtly called me a hen that couldn't lay eggs. I was drowning in the grief of losing my child. Yet Shenyan never came to see me once. That very afternoon, he received an imperial decree and left for the south to manage flood control. Lord Shen was busy with countless state affairs. He accomplished quite a lot in the south. I heard that when he left the city, the common people lined the streets to see him off. The only thing he ever sent me came with a letter, a dried purple jasmine, a flower rarely seen in the capital. I had studied too, and I knew this was called having nothing from Jiangyan. I send you a branch of spring quite refined. I wonder what he saw during his breaks from flood control that finally made him remember that far away in the capital, he still had a wife who had just lost their child. But was this all I wanted? This dried purple jasmine crumbled to dust with just a pinch. It couldn't even compare to the umbrella the doorman handed me when I went out. Up to this point, things were still bearable. I truly gave up on Shenyan in the 10th year of our marriage. He brought back a boy from the clan and gave him to me to raise. I was so overjoyed I didn't know what to do, and attended to everything personally. During this time, 2 things happened. The first was that by the time the child turned 2, he had never once done something like feeding him soup. What was Shenyan doing at that time? He was in the palace assisting the young emperor. The poetry collections the young emperor read daily all had annotations, written in his own hand with little illustrations drawn beside them. I had no idea where he found the time to do all this. The new emperor is young and cannot be separated from his mother. I've heard the Empress Dowager is beautiful when she was a noble consort. Her beauty was already unrivaled in the harem. Come to think of it, that Empress Dowager is actually a few years younger than me. And when the young emperor was frightened awake by thunder, and the Empress Dowager couldn't calm him down, the first thing she did was summon Chancellor Shen. They're always together. I wouldn't dare say I am jealous of the reigning Empress Dowager, but there are indeed occasional rumors among the common folk. Things like the Empress Dowager and young emperor being a widow and orphan. Things like a powerful minister willingly serving at a woman's feet. And so on. Shenyan has eyes and ears all over the capital. He couldn't possibly not know, but he has never explained to me. The second thing is that my Yor has learned to talk. He said, if only he were the emperor. I was shocked when I heard this. These are words that could get you beheaded if spread. That was the first time I hit him. But I knew the second half of yours were, if only I were the emperor. That way, Daddy could spend time with me. The army returned triumphant. The crown prince went outside the city to personally welcome them, and half the city's people crowded on both sides of the road to watch. Shenlin went out early in the morning. Such a good opportunity to show off among the noble ladies, how could she bear to miss it? I heard she booked an excellent private room at Wenlai Pavilion to host her close friends in Jingquan. Wenlai Pavilion is adjacent to Chang'an Street. When the time came, she would only need to lift the door curtain and look out to see her brother who had achieved great merit and was renowned throughout the land. Only my mother-in-law and I were left in the residence. I was in my room going over the account books when Chower, a maid from her quarters, came to deliver a message, saying the old madam's leg ailment had flared up. I took some silver and called for the gatekeeper, telling him to go fetch a doctor. Chower said, the old madam said there is no need for all this trouble. It is just her usual ailment. She just wants you to go and see her and say a few comforting words. I understood at once. The old madam was summoning me for a lecture. The bedchamber was filled with curling incense smoke. My mother-in-law half reclined on the couch. Seeing me come to pay my respects, she turned a round of prayer beads and said, I am getting on in years now. Not like you with your youth and beauty. I am afraid in a few years, all the affairs of this household, big and small, will fall to you to manage. If Shiyun has done anything poorly, please enlighten me, mother. The old madam's eyes rolled toward me, sizing me up from head to toe before she coldly snorted. Your husband has been away from home for 3 years and is about to return. Have you prepared his meals? Have you prepared hot water for his bath? Have you arranged for someone to receive him outside the palace gates? My son has now rendered great service to the kingdom, so nothing about his food, clothing, shelter, or travel can be handled carelessly. You've become quite a person of standing among the womenfolk circles in the capital now. In your daily conduct, you should be more steady and dignified. Don't just think about dressing in bright reds and greens and lose the Shen family's face. Shen Yan had entered the palace for a victory banquet, and later there were invitations from colleagues. He was cold by nature, and in the future when he held power over the realm, ordinary officials would naturally find it hard to even get a meeting with him. But unfortunately, he was only a third-rank official now, and he couldn't afford not to attend the drinking gatherings in officialdom. What food did he need? All he needed was just a bowl of hangover soup. Shenyan had just rendered great merit, with so many pairs of eyes watching from inside and out. Keeping a low profile wasn't even enough, so sending someone specifically to wait outside the palace, wouldn't that slap the label of arrogance on him? As for wearing red and green, I lowered my head and glanced at myself. I was indeed wearing a lotus pink dress today. It was just that the color was a bit eye-catching, and it happened to coincide with Shenyan's return. I didn't expect that in the old lady's eyes it had become frivolous and wanton. Forget it. Saying more was useless. After the old lady said all this, the indecision since my rebirth had finally been completely let go of here, as long as it wasn't a great crime that would implicate 9 generations. Whatever happened to Shenyan had nothing to do with me anymore. Whatever his mother wanted, so be it. I curtsied and said, Mother has thought it through thoroughly. Everything will be done as Mother wishes. Shiyun will go out and handle it now. Just as I lifted my foot, the old servant beside her said, Madam, the old madam's leg ailment is acting up. Please massage her feet. Outside there was a blazing sun, not a wisp of cloud in the sky. On such a hot day, how could her legs be cold? I raised an eyebrow and smiled. Is mother's leg ailment really acting up? My mother-in-law furrowed her brows and said unhappily, "What do you mean?" I straightened my hem by myself. "If mother is feeling unwell, you should call a doctor to take a proper look. Shi-yun knows nothing of medicine, and I am afraid pressing the wrong acupoints would only make things worse. This daughter-in-law still has some account books to attend to, so I'll take my leave and not disturb mother's peace. Hamph, now that you've married a good husband and people give you some face outside, you come home and act so disrespectful. Serving your mother-in-law is your duty. If you are too busy, why not add a few more people to my son's chambers? With others to help you, you won't be so busy anymore." My expression turned cold. The Shen family doesn't take concubines. That was agreed upon before the marriage. Seeing my anger, a smug look flashed across my mother-in-law's face. Times change. My son toils day and night on state affairs, sharing His Majesty's burdens. Yet there is not even someone to grind ink and serve him in his chambers. If word got out, people would laugh. Not to mention, the Shen family's legacy will need heirs to carry on someday. Shi-yun, you should be sensible. Your mother-in-law is only thinking of you and the Shen family. Even for Princess Pingyang's sake, she wouldn't easily let Shenyan take concubines right now. She said this only because she knew I would never agree just to force me to submit. I slowly came to a stop. Outside it was bright and sunny, yet I felt not a trace of warmth in my body. This Shen family is really cold. Cold enough to make one's heart go numb, he said softly. No matter, a divorce will do. What did you say? Not to mention my mother-in-law, even Xinger, the maid who came with me as part of my dowry, was greatly shocked. She actually disregarded propriety and reached out to tug at my sleeve. I heard my own voice grow a bit louder, more resolute, even carrying a hint of relief at finally having said it. It is fine. Your daughter-in-law and my husband will simply divorce. After leaving my mother-in-law's place, Xinger followed behind me the whole way. She anxiously called out to stop me, tears welling in her eyes. In her desperation, she actually used the form of address from when I was still in my maiden chambers. Miss, this impulsive decision of yours, what are we to do? If the master and madam see you return home after a divorce, how heartbroken would they be? They've been eagerly hoping for your happiness. How about we go back and apologize to the old madam? I stopped in my tracks and waved my hand wearily. Singer, this isn't an impulsive decision. You know in your heart what kind of life I've lived in the Shen family these 5 years. As for father and mother, in my previous life, Shenyan harbored resentment toward my father, on one hand, and cherished his reputation on the other, unwilling to give others any grounds for gossip. Even with his high position and great power, he never helped my father in the slightest. By the time I died, my father was still just a county deputy. He only wished for my happiness. It is just that since I am getting a divorce, I can't go back to my parents' home. I've always been strong-willed. To suffer grievances and get divorced, then go back crying and begging my parents for protection. I can't afford to lose such face, and I can't bear to have my parents be criticized by others. I secretly clenched my fists. The world is so vast. Since the Shen household has no place for me, I should find somewhere to settle down soon. Music, chess, calligraphy, and painting none are my forte. The classics and histories, I am not exactly proficient in those either. What I excel at most is precisely what I hate the most. I can manage a household. It was precisely because Shenyan was indifferent that in my past life I suffered endless grievances, which honed my ability to be flawless in everything. Xinger saw me writing the divorce paper in my room and broke into sobs. Miss, what divorced woman in this world has ever lived? Well, even remarrying would be difficult. No matter how wrong the old madam may be, you'll still be living your life with the young master. Please think this through carefully. Yes, the days are spent between me and Shenyan. I already knew what it was like to live with him. I patted Xinger's head and said word by word, Shinger, in this world, no one has to spend their whole life with anyone else. Shenyan came back very late. He came back in a warm sedan chair. Besides two personal attendants, there were also two servant boys on either side, who had gone specifically to pick him up. Quite the grand display. I stood under the moonlight waiting for him. Seeing his sedan from afar, I suddenly remembered that in my past life, he also used to return only late at night. The official banquets were noisy, with hidden daggers behind the clinking of cups. Yet there was still someone who truly cared for him, waiting for him to return under the stars and moon, ready to hand him a bowl of hangover soup. What did he do back then? Oh, back then. He asked if everything was well at home, asked after his mother-in-law, asked about his younger sister, drank the hangover soup, and went straight to sleep. Perhaps it was because I was standing right there before him, alive and well. In short, after 3 years away from home, he never asked about me. Shenyan had earned great merit, traveling north all the way from the southeast, with every official along the way showering him with flattery. He entered the palace and received rewards from His Majesty. He went to banquets and was complimented by his colleagues. As the saying goes, on a spirited horse riding the spring breeze with pride, one sees all the flowers of Chang'an in a single day. Such a glorious day finally came to an end. I stood outside the house, holding a lantern, quietly waiting for him. The warm sedan slowly descended, the curtain lifted, revealing an exceptionally refined face. I hadn't seen Shenyan at this age for a long time. In my memory, the last image of him wielding power over the court was of someone full of authority, always coming and going in haste. The him of now wasn't as impassive as he would become later. His face carried a light flush, clearly drunk, yet his eyes alone remained as dark as if dipped in ink. I called out to him, "Husband, your wife has been waiting for you for quite some time. Congratulations on your great joy." He seemed utterly exhausted, responded indifferently, took the cloak handed over by the servant boy, draped it over himself, and walked inside, casually asking, "Is everything well in the manor, just like in my previous life?" I stood in place, holding the lantern, and said, "There are too many gossiping mouths in the manor. I have been waiting here for my lord for quite a while, as I have something to say." Shenyan saw that I didn't follow, and his brows furrowed slightly. Having drunk wine and been jostled in the sedan chair the whole way, he surely wasn't feeling well yet. He was one who was used to enduring. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he suppressed a hint of impatience, lifting his eyelids to look at me. "What is it?" I dismissed the servants and simply smiled at him. "I wish to request a divorce, so we may part ways and both find peace." At that moment, a strong wind suddenly rose out of nowhere, causing the lantern in my hand to flicker on and off, along with the two shadows on the ground swaying and darting about chaotically. I steadied the lantern with divided attention, and when I looked up again, I only heard Shenyan coldly ask, "Do you even know what you are saying?" I took out an item from my sleeve. "The divorce agreement is right here." After a long while, I heard Shenyan let out a cold laugh. "Madam has prepared everything quite thoroughly. This is a matter of great importance. We shall discuss it tomorrow. It is late. Madam should rest early." With that said, he snatched the divorce agreement and left with a flick of his sleeve. A dreamless night. When I woke up the next day, Shenyan had already left for court. I heard that last night his courtyard called for sobering soup, but the kitchen naturally hadn't prepared any in advance. There were only some good dishes like roasted venison and crystal pork knuckle waiting for him, plus a turtle soup that could at least soothe the stomach. Shinger told me that when Shenyan saw these dishes, his expression turned very sour. It wasn't until the servants explained that the old madam had ordered them prepared that he held his tongue. But he still had the cook woken up in the middle of the night to make sobering soup, causing a commotion until midnight before finally settling down. As Shinger was telling me this, I was pinning a white jade orchid hairpin into my hair. Following mother-in-law's wishes, this autumn incense-colored jacket today, paired with a plain hairpin, should count as low-key and dignified. "Shinger, do you think it looks good?" My young lady naturally looks good in anything. But miss, what time is it already? How do you still have the mood to dress up? I smiled faintly. Mutual divorce is just a stance. It won't happen any time soon. Shen Yan won't be back from work for a while, so let's go out for a stroll and bask in Lord Shen's reflected glory. That day, I went around visiting the womenfolk of several households. Shen Yan was a rising star in the court, and quite a few people wanted to curry favor with him. Many wives and concubines of capital officials were still thinking about how to find an excuse to invite me out. But unexpectedly, I took the initiative to pay them visits. They were eager to build connections, and I was also amiable in attitude. After exchanging pleasantries, our relationships grew much closer. It is just that during our casual chats, seeing the worried look on my face, they couldn't help but ask a question or two. It is nothing major, just my mother-in-law, her leg ailment keeps flaring up. The old lady is getting on in years, and her legs aren't convenient. She is naturally someone who loves to chat and enjoys liveliness, but there are only so few people in the household, and she has grown tired of seeing the same faces over and over. If someone could visit her more often and keep her company, that would be wonderful. If mother-in-law is happy, surely my husband would be pleased as well. Everyone here was shrewd, with words spoken so plainly. What was there not to understand? By the time I got home, the sun had already set. Shen Yan hadn't returned yet, but Chower came again to deliver a message, saying my mother-in-law summoned me. Just as I was about to enter her courtyard, a basin of foot-washing water was splashed out. I pretended not to see it, stood at a distance, and politely asked what she wanted. My mother-in-law slapped the teacup on the table until it rattled. "Where did you go? Gone the whole day without a trace. Yesterday, you rushed to see Yanner first. What did you say to him? You married into the Shen family as a daughter-in-law, and I merely lectured you a few words. Yet you are making a fuss about divorce, and you've even learned to go complain to your husband." Even now, she still didn't believe it. I am not making a fuss about divorce. I am determined to divorce. In this world, the path for a divorced woman is hard to walk. Either cut off your hair and become a nun, or return to your maiden family to rely on your father and brothers, enduring scorn while praying for remarriage. So they didn't believe I would dare. Not wanting to waste my breath on her, I skirted around the issue and said, "I heard that mother-in-law's leg ailment flared up. Xian was so worried she couldn't sleep all night, and spent the whole day outside looking for a doctor for mother-in-law. Now I am tired and need to go back to rest first." After saying that, not caring how she reacted, I pushed the door open and went straight back to my own quarters to eat. Just as a few small dishes were set on the table, someone outside announced that Shen Yan had returned. He lifted the curtain and came in. Seeing that I had ordered the meal without waiting for him, his lips parted slightly as if wanting to say something, but he forcibly held back. After dismissing the servants, he said in a deep voice, "I've been away from home for 3 years, traveling hard the whole way. Now I've finally returned with great difficulty, and what is this? Can't I have even one day of peace? Husband was drunk yesterday, and as they say, nobles are forgetful, so I'll remind husband once more. We've been married for many years without children, and I am requesting to leave this marriage. The divorce papers have already been written. After husband reads them, please sign your name quickly. If you are really too busy with official affairs, a thumbprint will do." "What do you take me for?" Shen Yan clenched his teeth, about to explode, but then seemed to remember something. His expression changed slightly, and he actually calmed himself down and said, "I've heard all about what happened with my mother. I'll go talk to her myself. My mother is getting old. Don't hold it against her too much." I was surprised. Was this meant to placate me? In my past life, there were all sorts of friction between my mother-in-law and me. Shen Yan had eyes and ears everywhere. How could he not know? Yet, he never once mediated between us, nor ever offered me a single word of comfort. He just watched coldly as I was worn down day after day in the inner chambers. Now that I've brought up divorce, he suddenly realizes I've been wronged. Isn't this just picking on the soft persimmon? I dislike my mother-in-law's various behaviors, but I hate Shenyan even more. Conflicts between women and their mothers-in-law in this world are mostly caused by husbands standing idly by. The husband bears the title of filial son, while all the bitterness is left for the wife alone to swallow. He reads the books of sages, always talking about the world and its people. He is a minister trusted by the young emperor, a good official in the mouths of the common people, a filial son in his mother's eyes. Yet, he alone failed me. My husband's words are quite unnecessary. How could you become estranged from mother-in-law because of me? Now that we are both here, please hurry and hand over the divorce agreement. If my husband is dissatisfied with the one I wrote, it is also fine for you to write a new letter of wife release. You, what exactly do you want? I said calmly. I have already made myself very clear. I want a divorce. Shenyan said angrily, marriage is a major matter. How can it be decided by you alone? Why can't we divorce? I advised gently. There are so many women in the capital who want to marry you. Divorcing me would be greatly beneficial to you, my husband. Shenyan actually fell silent, which was rare seeing this. I raised my hand and called for Singer to see the guest out. As he was about to leave, Shenyan stood at the doorframe, suddenly turned back and asked, "Do you really not want to live with me? But what did I do wrong?" I widened my eyes in surprise. He actually asked such a question. After a moment of silence, I replied, "Then what about you? What kind of life do you want with me?" Shenyan was momentarily stunned in place. The table, full of exquisite dishes, all originally my favorites, now seemed to have lost all their color. I'd lost my appetite, and after a long while, finally waved for the servants to take everything away. Although Shenyan had just returned from the southeast, there were officials forming factions in Zhongzhou, and His Majesty assigned him to investigate secretly again. I remembered this matter. In my previous life, this trip of his, round trip, took nearly a month. During the time he was away, I still carried the banner of Madame Shen, pretending to be a filial daughter-in-law, visiting relatives and friends every day. What I wanted came quickly. Ladies from various families began visiting my mother-in-law. The old lady had raised a successful son and was just worrying about having nowhere to show off. Now it was a perfect match. Everyone came to flatter and fawn over her. Even if she didn't have leg problems, she'd pretend she couldn't get out of bed. Speaking of Lord Shen, he is a favorite before the emperor. If your family has visited old Madame Shen, there is no reason for mine not to. In no time, the Shen family's doorstep was nearly worn flat. At first, my mother-in-law was quite pleased with herself, but as time went on, her body gradually couldn't hold up anymore. So many people wanted to come visit her, one wave after another, even after sending them away. Besides, they weren't that easy to send away. How could she refuse to see relatives from her maiden family who came from so far away? Back when the Shen family was down on their luck, they relied on several relatives from her maiden family for support. Now that they'd prospered, were they going to abandon their poor relatives? What about the families of Shenyan's colleagues? Everyone serves as officials at court. If you see the Xia family but not the Zhang family, showing favoritism, wouldn't that breed resentment? What if things go wrong and it affects her son's career? When she finally got some free time, there were still the renowned doctors I'd found from various places, lining up to take her pulse and massage her legs. After about 10 days, the old lady was barely holding on while receiving visitors. But when outsiders saw she really wasn't in good spirits, just as I'd said, they came to visit even more frequently. I'd long heard that Nanyan Temple, Li, outside the capital, was a wonderful place for spring outings. In my past life, I was confined to the inner quarters and never got to visit. Now that my mother-in-law was busy entertaining guests, I found myself free, so I took a few attendants and went to the temple to burn incense and pray for her. Inside Nanyan Temple, peach blossoms blazed bright. Plump mandarin fish swam by the stream, and white egrets danced in the fields. I enjoyed myself so much at Nanyan Temple that I almost forgot to go home. I stayed for a full 5 days before reluctantly having my people pack up to head back to the capital. We took the main road back, and since most of the party were women, I specifically instructed the coachman to drive slowly. Suddenly hearing the clamor of horse hooves in the distance, they were already behind us in the blink of an eye. The driver hastily reined in the horse to make way. Shinger lifted the curtain and saw a group of riders wearing flying fish robes with embroidered spring sabers at their waists. We had actually encountered the Jinyue out on a case. Horse hooves flew, kicking up clouds of dust. I frowned and covered my nose and mouth, about to tell Shinger to lower the curtain, when suddenly I heard her let out a startled cry. Her whole body shuddered violently. One hand instinctively covered her mouth, while the other hung on the carriage curtain, wanting to lower it yet seeming too terrified to dare move at all. I followed her gaze. It turned out the lord at the front was holding a long rope in his hand, and at the end of that rope, a person was bound. Or rather, I wasn't sure if it could still be called a person. That person must have originally been running behind the horse, but at some unknown point couldn't keep up and fell. Then was dragged all the way here now, nothing but tattered clothes and a bloody, mangled mess of flesh. Just as I was thinking this, the troop of Jinyue suddenly stopped. The lord at the front dismounted with a flip, stepping one foot onto that person's shoulder. He drew his cold blade from his waist, the tip casually flicking aside that person's disheveled hair. The lord leaned down and asked a question or two, but seemed not to get the answer he wanted. He shook his head slightly, a look of regret on his face. Then his hand moved, and the blade in his hand was already stained with blood, in broad daylight, openly killing someone. Shinger stared with her eyes wide open, and I was grateful she had already covered her mouth with her hand. After killing the man, that lord unhurriedly pulled out a snow-white handkerchief from his robe and wiped the blood droplets hanging from the blade's tip. Whether intentionally or not, he raised his head and glanced toward us. Shinger was already too frightened to say anything. I clenched my palms tightly, met his gaze from afar, and gave a slight nod as a return greeting. Immediately after, that lord kicked the corpse aside, carelessly tossed the dirtied handkerchief, and led his men away. Seeing those living Yama had finally left, Shinger collapsed onto me at once. She asked me tremblingly, "Miss, this servant was scared to death. In all my life, this is the first time I've seen someone killed. Who was that? Even if handling a case, shouldn't the authorities interrogate first? How could he? I lowered my gaze and patted her back. That is the current Jinyue assistant commander, Lu Yun. He is also the place I've found for myself. We were already traveling slowly, and after the incident on the road, the accompanying maids were badly frightened and kept crying, so the driver went even slower. By the time we reached home, the sky had already turned dark. Outside the Shen residence, there wasn't a single carriage. I was surprised. Once inside the residence, it was quiet all the way, a complete change from the usual bustle of distinguished guests. Only 2 servants stood silently at the corner of the corridor, on duty. The moment I stepped into the inner courtyard, it was deathly silent. Only my room had a light on. A silhouette was cast upon the window. Before I could make out who it was, the door had already opened. Quilian, Shenyan's personal attendant, walked out. While saying, "Please come in, madam," he discreetly shot me a look, the gist being, Shenyan was in a rage, don't provoke him. Shenyan sat upright behind the table, a brocade box placed before him. He looked very calm, far calmer than any of our previous conversations. In truth, anyone who knew him well understood that Shenyan in this state was the most dangerous to provoke. Compared to my previous life, why had he returned so early? A full 4 or 5 days early. I took a deep breath, lifted my skirt hem, and went in. Quilian properly closed the door behind me and stood guard outside. Shenyan quietly sipped his tea. I, too, remained silent in contemplation. The atmosphere in the room was oppressive, with only the flickering candlelight, hinting at the coming storm. "I've been waiting here for you for a day and a night. Where did Madam go?" I said flatly. "Since my husband has waited for a day and a night, you must have already found out. If there was something urgent, you could have sent someone to find me at Nanyan Temple. I never asked my husband to wait here. You chose to wait on your own accord, so why be angry?" Shenyan was furious to the extreme, and actually let out a scornful laugh. "I willingly waited for you. Madam truly has a silver tongue." I went out on official business, thinking of Madam, hoping to finish early and return soon. Madam, guess what I saw when I rushed back day and night? I saw my Shen residence bustling like a marketplace, inviting gossip and criticism. My mother merely had some misunderstandings with you, yet you used such methods to completely drain her body. If I hadn't returned early, wouldn't I be holding a funeral for my mother? As for me, he paused for a moment, then continued. When you married me, you were quite innocent and lovely. How did you become so cold and heartless now? I tilted my head upward, wanting to see the sky, but only saw lines and frames the beams on the roof, the ceiling of the Shen household that had trapped a person until they were covered in blood. Yet they ask, where is your innocence and loveliness? I closed my eyes, no longer willing to argue. Since things have come to this, our bond as husband and wife is severed. Husband, please just write the divorce papers. What a bond severed. You did all this just to force me to sign the divorce papers. Is our Shen family some dragon's den or tiger's lair that you would go to such lengths? Fine, fine! How hard you schemed! You want it, I'll grant you! Quilian, bring the brush and ink. Shenyan flicked his sleeve, knocking the brocade box off the table. It fell to the ground with a clatter, splitting in two. A jade bracelet tumbled out. Its luster was excellent, but sadly, it shattered into pieces. Quilian had been waiting outside, and now presented the brush and ink. He hesitated on the spot for a moment, then suddenly knelt down and said earnestly, "Your humble servant shouldn't meddle in Master's family affairs. But please forgive me for speaking out of turn, madam. You are being foolish. While I was on duty with Master in Zhongzhou, he'd already heard about you frequently socializing with ladies from various families lately. Although it is not good for officials to be too close in private, Master thought that since you were doing these things under the name of Madame Shen, perhaps there was still room to turn things around regarding the divorce. So he hurried back. Master even specially brought you a gift. Madam, what you've done has truly broken Master's heart." My heart trembled slightly. Just as I was about to speak, I heard Shenyan bark. "Shut your mouth! Why are you telling her all this? Get out!" Shenyan pulled something from his sleeve and unfolded it. It was the divorce letter I had written. He had actually been carrying it with him. Shenyan glanced over it, gave a cold laugh, picked up the brush and signed his name with a flourish, then tossed the paper with its still wet ink in front of me. He said grimly, "As you wished, Wen Xian. From now on, you and I, Shenyan, have nothing to do with each other anymore." That divorce paper, nothing but a flimsy sheet of paper, yet what it carried was a woman's fate, heavy as 1,000 tons. I picked up the divorce paper from the ground, carefully blew dry the ink on it, neatly folded it, and put it away. When I spoke again, it was as if I had already traversed countless mountains and rivers. "You rushed back from Zhongzhou, even brought things with you, all eager and warm-hearted, only to have me pour a bucket of cold water over your head. So you are angry. Is that it? But Shenyan, things like this have already happened to me hundreds and thousands of times. Do you remember when we were first married? You had a small gathering with your classmates. It rained so heavily that day, and I brought a cloak to pick you up. No one else had anyone come for them. Only you did. Your classmates just teased you a couple of times, and you felt you'd lost face. That rain gear, you shared it with one person. That cloak, 2 other people split it, holding it over their heads together. As for me, because men and women should keep their distance, I had no choice but to spend a string of coins to buy an old bamboo hat from the waiter. The day your name appeared on the golden list, I was overjoyed. I cooked a whole table of dishes, reheated them 3 times, waited on an empty stomach just for you to come back. When you finally did, you said you'd already eaten outside. That whole table of dishes, couldn't you have at least sat with me for a bit? Had a bite or two? For your birthday, I made you clothes, the cloud patterns on it. I embroidered them stitch by stitch with my own hands. You put that garment away, seemingly treasuring it greatly, but you never wore it even once. When we moved to the capital to take office, you brought every single scroll of your books from thousands of miles away. Yet that robe, you thought it too heavy and left it behind at the old residence. Outsiders all say I am blessed, having married an ideal husband, a girl from a humble family, yet able to become the mistress of a noble house. Little do they know, this noble house to me is nothing but a cage. Shenyan, you don't allow others to trample on your feelings. Then why do you trample on others' feelings? When we married, my parents did make some plans for me, but so what? When you become a parent someday, won't you make plans for your children? How could you be so cold to me? These were all real things that happened, and surely he remembered them too. With every sentence I spoke, Shenyan's face grew a shade paler. He said blankly, "Back then, I sighed, and earnestly spoke my final words to him. Shenyan, having nothing more to do with you is truly my blessing. If there is a next life, I won't marry you again." I went to find Lu Yun. The gatekeeper said their master had gone out to handle a case and arrest someone, and there was no telling when he would return. I said it was fine. I was the one asking a favor, so it was only right that I wait for him. When I died in my past life, Shenyan held power over the entire court, yet there was one person he was wary of, that was Lu Yun, who served as the commander of the embroidered uniform guard at the time. Shenyan was a regent minister who walked the path of righteousness, but Lu Yun had done plenty of shady work for the royal family and was known as the court's hound. He had never taken a wife. I heard he once had a sweetheart, but for some unknown reason, she passed away early, so he had been living alone ever since. As it happened, I had no intention of remarrying either. I wanted to find a way out through Lu Yun. This wait lasted an entire day. Lu Yun returned just as curfew fell, draped in moonlight. He rode up to me, barely reining in his horse, gave a slight nod, wearing a half-smile. "Madam Shen, I didn't expect we'd meet again so soon." I curtsied to him and said calmly, "Shen Yan and I have already divorced." The moment these words came out, even Lu Yun's expression changed. The gatekeeper had been coming over to take the horse, but upon hearing this, he couldn't help but say, "Madam Shen, what does your divorce from Lord Shen have to do with our master? Our lord and you have never even met before." In the night, Lu Yun's expression was cold and distant. "What brings Madam Shen to seek this Lu so late at night? I wish to find a job under your lordship." "Oh?" Lu Yun raised an eyebrow slightly. "This is really more than I can handle. Please leave, Madam Shen." Without even asking what kind of job, he dismounted and walked straight into the mansion. The saber at his waist clanged against the leather belt, jingling loudly, watching this hard-won opportunity about to slip away. I stared at his back, clenched my fists, and called out, "Lord Lu, please wait. I can manage a household. I've been learning household management from my mother since childhood." After marrying Shen Yan, I accompanied him from the countryside to the court, never making a single mistake. Shen Yan has been gone for 3 years without returning home, and I've been handling everything in the manner how to deal with officials in the capital, what gifts to offer the palace during festivals, all without losing an inch of propriety. Lord Lu, doesn't your manner lack someone like this? It is far more than just accompanying Shen Yan until now. Even in my past life, when he rose to become a high-ranking official, I was the one managing all domestic affairs behind the scenes. Matters of the inner household never cost him a moment's worry. Lord Shen may have held power over the realm, but relying solely on his meager salary, how could he support an entire manor full of people? How could it cover all his dealings above and below? How could it be enough for his social engagements? It was I who seized the right timing to take the family's silver to buy farmland and shops. It was I who picked the right people and supported several old trading houses in distress. That is how the Shen family built its great fortune. But these are matters from my past life. I cannot speak of them. My nails nearly dug into my flesh. I stared fixedly toward where Lu Yun stood, and he finally stopped. Lu Yun leisurely turned around. He stared at me for a long moment, then let out a soft scoff. I heard your mother-in-law has been suffering in silence, killed with kindness by you, losing quite a bit of weight in just a few days. Madame Shen is truly filial. I lowered my gaze. The scheming in the inner courtyard is merely for self-preservation. I've made myself a laughingstock to my lord. Other people's affairs are not for this Lu to meddle in. You divorced Shen Yan and came straight to me so heedless of your reputation. Aren't you afraid of what people will say? Ixi Yun is long past being an unmarried maiden. As for gossip, tongues grow on other people's mouths, and Shi Yun can't control them. A divorced woman's life is hard enough. Even if she does nothing, people will still talk. Besides, I work for my lord, and my lord pays me silver. Between you and me, everything is clean and proper, with a clear conscience. He laughed softly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, carrying a cold mockery. What a fine, clear conscience. Unfortunately, Madame Shen, my residence already has a steward to manage things. Every household has a steward, so why do noble families still take wives? If it were only for bearing heirs, what kind of woman wouldn't do? Lord Lu, a steward only handles trivial matters around the residence, but I can manage your household for you. If you have no plans to marry for now, why not pay me silver and let me manage your household? You need to make a living, and so do I. We each get what we need, how about it? Lu Yun pondered in silence. Seeing him pondering, I knew I had a chance, and immediately continued. Even if Lord Lu doesn't consider himself, he should consider his relatives and friends. Most stewards are men, and when the women of the clan want to say something, it is always inconvenient. There are indeed experienced nannies hired as stewards, but most nannies are already old. Lord Lu, looking across the entire capital, you won't find anyone more suitable than me. I've been waiting here for you for a whole day. Why not give it a try? If you find it unsatisfactory, just dismiss me, and I will never pester you again. In the end, it is nothing more than you got divorced and don't want to go back to rely on your father and brothers. So you came to me to seek a way out. We're neither relatives nor acquaintances, why should I help you? With things having come to this point, I had no choice but to look at him frankly and say, yes, you indeed have no reason to help me. Whether to help or not is just a single thought for you. It is entirely up to you to decide. Lu Yun said nothing, his probing gaze falling on me. His fingertips rested on the scabbard at his waist, tapping twice with a dada sound. The wind blew the hem of his robe. He stood there, with a gloomy, fierce aura between his brows from years of being steeped in blood. He didn't speak, so I waited in silence. I knew he was weighing my value. Lu Yun's place was one way out for me, but not the only way out. The world is vast, I would always have somewhere to go. It is just that his place was the best, the most suitable. After a long silence, he finally relented. I am merely a vice commander of the Jinyue. In terms of official rank, I am still one grade lower than Lord Shen. Working at my residence might be beneath. Miss Wen, how much monthly salary does the lady want? He actually knew my original surname was Wen. My eyelashes trembled twice. I kept my composure and straightened my back, saying softly, for the first month, I only want 1 tael of silver. If my lord finds Shiyun's household management satisfactory, then afterwards I want 50% of my lord's monthly salary. Since we're living together, it is only fitting to ask for 50%. Besides, the farmland harvests, these are all my returns to him, far more than what he gives me. Miss Wen's asking price isn't low. My lord has a bright future ahead, you won't miss this much. The man let out a cold snort, pressed his saber, and tossed out a casual remark. I'll take your auspicious words. The Shen household lost a head madam, the Liu household gained a steward. The first thing I did at the Liu residence was to reconcile accounts with the accountant, sorting out the Liu household's income and expenses over the years. Compared to Shen Yan's indifference, Liu Yan was even more unpredictable. Every morning before he left for duty, I would wait outside his room to report household matters to him. The path out of the residence was short, and he walked fast. I followed closely behind, picking only the important things to say. Most of the time, I only got a few bland words in return. Noted. Sometimes he would also stop, look at me with a half smile, and ask, "What does Miss Wen think? If you have to ask me about everything, what is the use of me spending money to keep you?" Liu Yan didn't come back to sleep every night. The embroidered uniform guard looked impressive, but it was actually a tough job. Catching people and handling cases, spending a night in the middle of nowhere was common. When he didn't come back, the servants always breathed a sigh of relief. He was a difficult master to deal with. A maid described to me vividly that their master carried heavy killing intent. When his changed clothes were soaked in water, they could soak out 3 basins of bloody water. Who knows how many people he'd killed. I recalled that Liu Yun wiped his blade with white silk after killing, probably not liking others' blood splashing on him. Thinking of this, my brow twitched. Liu Yun had suffered serious injuries, advising him to wear more clothes and drink less. Those were a wife's duties. I was just managing the household for him. Of course, I didn't want him to develop any lingering illness and die early either. I was still counting on him to pay my monthly allowance. I instructed the kitchen to stew some nourishing medicinal soup, simmering over low heat for 12 shichen. Whenever he came home, serve him a bowl first. As for whether he ate it or not, that was his business. Managing farmland and shops were things I was used to doing in my past life. Doing it again now was just second nature. I even knew by heart which businesses to support and which people to use. After the first month passed, the household's income increased by 20%, and the reception hall was renovated anew. We held a banquet at home, inviting the then Right Prime Minister, Lord Zhao Songming. Lord Zhao was elderly and shouldn't drink strong liquor. I used mulberry wine I had personally steeped. As for the mulberries, they were grown on our own estate. Lord Zhao said nothing out loud, but when he was leaving, the servant boy by his side specially came to ask for 2 jugs. When Liu Yun returned from seeing the guest off, I was leaning against the doorway, eyes sparkling as I waited for him. How was it? I was quite pleased with myself, just waiting for him to praise me. It was late spring, the grass and trees shimmering with a silky green. Liu Yun stood under the eaves, his figure tall and slender. He glanced at me and said lightly, "Not bad, just not bad." I got anxious, stamping my feet as I said that Lord Zhao came from a humble background, is rigid in his ways, extremely protective of his reputation, a truly incorruptible man. So many people outside want to send gifts to curry favor but can't find a way in. Even if you had 10,000 gold, he wouldn't accept it. Yet now he was willing to make an exception and lower himself to ask us for 2 jugs of wine. This is just not bad. Liu Yun finally showed a bit of interest. How did you know he'd love that wine? Lord Zhao eats bland food, and that wine is obviously very sweet. It has to be sweet. Lord Zhao had a daughter late in life, and he cherishes her so much. He is afraid she'll melt away. This fruit wine is sweet and not intoxicating, and I even added osmanthus honey to it, making it much more fragrant than what is sold on the market. Lord Zhao's deep love for his daughter is evident. He is taking these treats back for his beloved daughter at home. I was so pleased with myself, reaching out my hand to ask for a reward. If the job was done to your satisfaction, I'd like to ask for 1 or 2 taels of silver as a reward, my lord. That was my first month's wages. Fragments of light hung on Liu Yun's lashes. He seemed to smile briefly, but his expression quickly darkened again. He stepped around me, leaving behind only a casual remark. "You'll get your share." I let out a long breath behind him. I'd managed to stay in this Liu manor, at least. The capital is only so big. I divorced Shen Yan and then turned up at the Lu Manor. The whole affair caused quite a stir. People were saying all sorts of things. Most of it was dirty, talk about me and Lu Yun things. Like I'd climbed over the wall to pluck another's flower and secretly gotten pregnant, or that we'd been scheming together all along. And Shen Yan, from the sound of it, had been royally cuckolded by me, having been husband and wife with him for 2 lifetimes. I knew these words wouldn't affect him. If he cared about rumors, why would he have let those stories about him and the new Empress Dowager spread unchecked in the previous life? I couldn't control what happened on Shenyan's end. I wasn't afraid of people talking about what I'd done, but I was uncertain, terrified Lu Yun might take his anger out on me. Several times when reporting household affairs to him, I wanted to speak but held back. Before I could muster the courage to speak up, the rumors outside suddenly stopped. A few ruffians who'd been running their mouths at the tea houses were even thrown into prison. Only the Jinyue could have pulled that off. This alarmed me greatly. Lu Yun must have been truly fed up and lost his temper. I brewed some fine tea and knocked on Lu Yun's study door, trembling with nerves. This was my first time seeking him out for a personal matter, yet it was such an awkward affair compared to the furious outburst I had imagined. Lu Yun appeared calm and composed. He was reviewing official documents, stopped his brush, curved one corner of his lips, and showed a mocking expression. This wasn't my doing. Perhaps Miss Wen should go ask Lord Shen. Shen Yan, he hadn't seen him for a long time. He was the talk of the capital, and even without deliberately inquiring, news of him would drift to my ears like the wind from time to time. I heard he had fallen ill, absent from court for several days straight, until the emperor summoned him and he dragged himself to the palace. Princess Pingyang waited at the palace gates to intercept him. What they said to each other was unknown, but the princess smashed the food box containing soup right then and there. I also heard that my former mother-in-law had gone to a countryside estate to recuperate, along with my former sister-in-law. Rumor had it that Shen Yan had forcibly sent them there. My former mother-in-law cried bitterly when getting into the sedan chair, cursing Shen Yan for being unfilial. In any case, it was no longer my concern. That evening, a violent rainstorm broke out with thunder and lightning surging. The gatekeeper brought word that a young girl of unknown origin wanted to come in to shelter from the rain. I found it strange. How would an ordinary commoner dare knock on the door of the embroidered uniform guard to seek shelter from the rain? The gatekeeper stamped his foot after hearing this. "Ah, head steward, you'd better go out and take a look." When I went out to look, there was a servant dressed in men's clothing outside the door, wearing dusty gray clothes with eyes of clear black and white. Caught in the rain, her hair had come loose, making it obvious at a glance that she was a girl. Who knows which family's young lady had snuck out? I couldn't be rude to her, so I brought her into the residence. She'd been soaked by the rain and her clothes couldn't be worn anymore, so I found a newly tailored narcissus skirt for her to put on. She was small in stature, and my skirt didn't fit her well, but she didn't care. With a few quick motions, she rolled the sleeves up to her wrists, came to my side, and very naturally asked me to help dry her hair by the fire, as if she'd mistaken me for a servant of her household. No matter what, I wouldn't stoop to arguing with a little girl. I lit a fire and took a comb to slowly brush her hair. Once the door was closed, the pouring rain was shut outside. The little girl leaned lazily against my knee with her hair down, not shy at all. Her eyes darted, and she said crisply, "This dress of yours is pretty nice. Quite good-looking, just a bit too big." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "If you like it, shall I alter it for you?" She nodded solemnly, not polite at all in her words. "Alter it. Do it now." Her half-dry hair was casually gathered into a braid. The girl half lay on the chair, propping up her head to watch me alter the clothes. The needle and thread shuttled through my fingertips. She watched silently for a while, then asked, "Do you sew clothes for your husband like this too?" "My mother used to do this too." "I don't have a husband." My hands paused. I said calmly, "We divorced." Divorce is ultimately not something glorious. Normally, people wouldn't press further upon hearing this, but this little girl was obviously used to being straightforward. She furrowed her brows and said bluntly, "Why, you sew clothes so well and you are so pretty too. Why would your husband want to divorce you?" She praised me so bluntly that I simply didn't know what to say. I tied a knot in my needlework and changed the subject. "What about you? Which family's young miss are you? How did you end up here?" She pouted. "Daddy's busy with work and won't play with me." I was bored, so I ran out on my own to find some fun. It started raining, and when I looked up, your house was right there, so I knocked and came in. The little girl looked quite spoiled. After asking if she had eaten, I went to the kitchen and found a bowl of sweet porridge for her. The girl was still full of interest in my divorce, holding her bowl and asking question after question. If it were anyone else, I might have gotten annoyed, but her eyes were so innocent that I couldn't get angry. Pestered by her with no way out, I pressed 2 fingers together and conjured a flower out of thin air. This trick was something I specifically learned in my past life to amuse children. I never expected it would come in handy here. The little girl was indeed intrigued, grabbing the flower to examine it. I struck while the iron was hot and offered to have someone escort her back. "I haven't had enough fun yet. I am not going back." I had no choice but to make up lies with my eyes closed. "There is a bad person at our residence, with a fierce and terrifying look. If you don't go back soon, he'll give you a paddling." How fierce and terrifying, exactly? Just then, a clap of thunder sounded outside. The door was pushed open, and Lu Yun, having returned from who knows where, stood right at the doorway. I casually pointed at him. "Look, isn't he fierce and terrifying?" Lu Yun's hand gripped the doorframe. Hearing the words, "fierce and terrifying," his expression shifted several times, and finally, gritting his back teeth, he cupped his hands toward the little girl and said, "Your Highness Duanyang, why are you here? The entire palace has been turned upside down searching for you." Princess Duanyang, whose birth mother passed away early, was the most beloved princess of the current emperor. So it turned out, her father, who was busy with work, was the emperor himself. This time, it was my turn to stand frozen in place. Lu Yun wasn't as easygoing as me. After just a couple of sentences, he was ready to take the princess back to the palace. But how could the little princess be so easily dismissed? She pointed at me and said she wanted me to go back with her. Lu Yun frowned. "That won't do." "Why not? Sister Yun isn't your wife. Though she isn't this humble official's wife, she is the steward of this humble official's residence. She is just a steward. You can find another one." Lu Yun glanced at me sideways, his expression nonchalant. "That won't work. I can't find one this good out there. I beg the princess to understand my circumstances." My heart skipped a beat for no reason. Even the ruthless fear those with stubborn tempers. The little princess probably knew she couldn't out-argue Lu Yun, so she humphed and left reluctantly with a sour face. I thought this matter was over. But unexpectedly, a few days later, at a palace banquet, Princess Duanyang said something shocking. She actually asked Shenyan in front of everyone, "Sister Ayun is so wonderful. Why did you divorce her?" That one question made Shenyan's face turn pale. On one side was his beloved daughter, on the other his beloved minister. His Majesty punished the princess with confinement to reflect on her mistakes. This was palace business that I shouldn't have known about, but Lu Yun told me everything in detail. He wasn't a talkative person. I was wondering why he had changed his ways when he suddenly shifted topics, his tone playful. "His Majesty summons you to the palace tomorrow." Inside Taihe Hall, gilded incense burners sent wisps of smoke curling upward. "Rise and speak. Lift your head and let me have a look at you." The current emperor was over 50, his words carrying authority without anger. I stood up as instructed, catching a glimpse of the vermilion dragon pillars casting deep shadows in my peripheral vision. "Have you read any books?" "In response to your Majesty, aside from Theurda and Women's Admonitions, I have also read the 4 books." Not many women have read the 4 books. He asked me several questions from the books. Fortunately, they weren't too difficult. Though nervous, I answered reasonably well. His Majesty took a sip of tea, looking very interested. The matter of your divorce from Shen Qing has caused quite a stir. Even I have heard about it. This is your private affair, and I won't inquire into it. I just want to ask, after your divorce, you went to Lu Yun's place without regard for your reputation. What were you thinking? His Majesty asked. And I took a deep breath, not daring to deceive the Emperor. I replied softly. This subject believes she has talent for managing a household, so I sought Lord Lu's shelter. I am still young, and though divorced, I wish to carve out a path with my own 2 hands. I was unwilling to return home to await another marriage, and cause my parents further worry. His Majesty smiled. A spirited one indeed. Wen Jian raised a good daughter. Women in this world suffer from having no prospects, most depending on their husband's family. That you can do this, I admire it greatly. When the Empress was alive, she proposed multiple times to add female officials in the palace, so as not to waste talent. Unfortunately, the Empress was always in poor health and lacked the energy. Looking at it now, this matter still needs to be handled promptly. It would fulfill the Empress's dying wish. I widened my eyes in surprise, then quickly realized this was the palace, no ordinary place, and hurriedly lowered my gaze. His Majesty laughed again. You needn't be so nervous. It is just that Duanyang has been insisting on seeing you. Since the Empress passed, she rarely grows close to anyone. Now that I've met you, I am reassured. Since you've come to the palace, go keep her company while you are here. If you have time in the future, come visit her often. With that, he waved his hand, and the eunuch beside him immediately came forward to escort me out. Upon reaching outside the hall, that eunuch instructed a young eunuch nearby to fetch a palace entry token. I waited briefly under the corridor, and when I loosened my hands, my palms were already soaked with sweat. The scorching sun blazed like fire outside the Hall of Supreme Harmony. In the distance, a figure gradually approached, wearing purple official robes, his silhouette slender, like a snow pine on a green mountain. It was Shenyang. The capital is only so big. I knew in my heart that I would surely see him again, yet I never imagined it would be like this meeting him within the imperial palace. Across the long corridor at the bottom of the white marble steps, Shenyang stopped in his tracks. He raised his head to look at me, his eyes flickering. He probably hadn't expected to run into me here either. Among thousands of women in the world, few could have an audience with the Emperor in person. He had never liked me, and we had some unpleasantness during the divorce. Adding everything together, he surely had no lingering attachment to me. With rumors spreading throughout the capital, he probably despised me deeply. Yet, for just that instant, my intuition told me he was happy to see me. His expression changed too quickly, and before I could figure it out, he had already stopped before me. In the past, I called him husband. Now when I spoke again, I addressed him, Lord Shen. Shenyan's face suddenly went pale. He seemed to want to say something, but just then the hall doors opened, and the eunuch on duty summoned Shenyan inside for an audience with the Emperor. The hand that had reached halfway suddenly retracted into his sleeve. Shenyan composed his expression and followed behind the eunuch. As we brushed past each other, I heard a barely audible sorry. The voice was so soft, a murmur like the wind. I turned to look, but only saw the empty hem of his robe. He had lost a lot of weight. Duanyang was clingy. Only when the palace gates were about to be locked did he reluctantly let me go. At the palace gate, besides the guards on duty, there was a solitary figure. Who knows how long Shenyan had been waiting. It is getting late, I'll walk you back. When he said this, I was quite startled. I was about to politely decline, but he had already turned and walked ahead. It was the direction to the Lu residence. This was the only way back. I sighed and silently followed behind him. Neither of us spoke the entire way, only our 2 shadows on the ground intertwined. Curfew was approaching. Half the lanterns on the street were lit, the other half dim. Street vendors began to disperse. Passing by a stone bridge, a flower-selling girl blocked our way. "Mister, buy a bouquet for your wife. Freshly bloomed roses. They're flowers that symbolize everlasting love and growing old together." The girl had a sweet tongue. The last few flowers in her basket were blooming bashfully. Shenyan was about to reach for money, but I shook my head. "Little girl, he and I are not husband and wife." The color nearly drained completely from Shenyan's face. He forced himself to grab all the flowers from the basket, clutching them tightly together. When he spoke, his voice was incredibly strained. "How much?" "5 copper coins." The girl said this, but Shenyan pulled out a handful of gold melon seeds from his chest. "It is getting late. If the flowers don't sell tonight, they'll wilt by tomorrow morning." Seeing someone buying flowers so generously, several flower girls nearby swarmed over all at once. Shenyan refused no one, giving each a handful of gold melon seeds. Half a quarter hour later, his arms were already full. I stood watching from the side with arms crossed, unable to help but speak up to stop him. "Lord Shen, even if you are wealthy, gold shouldn't be spent like this." The man smiled self-deprecatingly, his tone bitter. "I really don't know how to spend money. The manor lacks a madam to manage the household. There used to be one, but he lost her. He was an extremely reserved and self-restrained person, never showing the slightest emotion even when feelings surged to their peak. Yet someone as proud as Shenyan finally admitted regret at this moment. When Shenyan returned late from court, I once thought about going to pick him up, but he didn't like being close to me in public and always refused. I never expected that one day we would walk together, only for it to be to Lu Yun's manor. Shenyan's heart twisted like a knife. "When you went to Lu Yun's place, I got the news that very day. I was angry, I resented it, but after much deliberation, I ended up angry at myself, hating myself for not understanding how good you were. You and I have always had a marriage agreement. It was I who neglected you, making you suffer so many grievances. Now I am filled with regret. From now on, I am willing to worry about what worries you. Rejoice in what brings you joy." "Ayun, can we start over?" A bright red bouquet of flowers was held up before my eyes. I was dazed for a moment, recalling a dried 4 o'clock flower that came with a letter many years ago. I shook my head, looking past him into the distance, where the lights ahead were already growing dim. "Lord Shen has read 10,000 books. Surely you understand the saying that a broken mirror cannot be made whole again. I don't need the flower in your hand. What I need is someone to turn to when my mother-in-law gives me a hard time. Someone who waits for me day and night and asks if I am warm. Love is mutual support, with both giving their share. Lord Shen, have you ever tried putting a baby to sleep by yourself? The baby cries endlessly, yet there is not a single person beside you to help. Those nights are truly so long." A look of confusion appeared in Shenyan's eyes. He didn't understand why I suddenly brought up babies, but still said, "If we had a child, we would naturally soothe them to sleep together." I smiled slightly and said no more. "Shenyan, your future is bright and brilliant. You'll be a good official praised by all. As for love missed is missed. Let's both look forward." His Majesty acted quickly. The Grand Princess wrote to me, saying in her letter that she had accepted the imperial decree to establish a school for women, selecting the outstanding ones to enter the palace as female officials. She wanted to invite me to be the deputy director of the academy to assist with the establishment. In the pavilion, I held the letter in my hands and read it over and over 3 times. I recognized every word, but together they seemed like a dream. "All right, you are about to have it memorized by now." A hand reached out from behind and snatched the letter away. "There are 2 head instructors in total. One is a respected matron who has served through 3 dynasties, and the other is a female scholar renowned throughout Jiangnan. The Grand Princess's intention is to promote you." Lu Yun sat down leaning against the table, reaching out to loosely cup the sunlight as if basking in the sun. Yet his fingertips held the letter, as though wishing it would burst into flames on its own, looking very much like he despised receiving letters from the Grand Princess. There is no reason not to go. His words clearly stated there was no reason not to go, yet his gaze was gloomy as if laced with poison. I sighed and called him Lu Yun. This was the first time I called him like this. He pressed his lips together and turned to look at me. Do you want to go? He had always been arrogant, with an eccentric temperament. Yet this sentence alone, his tone so low and soft, actually sounded like a plea. I didn't say whether I'd go or not, just looked at him and said, word by word, "Thank you for taking care of me." His eyes shifted slightly, and Lu Yun's expression suddenly turned cold. No need to thank me. You worked for me. I paid you silver. I only kept you back then because you had value. Unfortunately, this small temple can't hold you. I smiled faintly. I still need to thank you, not just for keeping me, but also for all his care. Other things aside, when I first entered the palace, the eunuchs didn't give me any trouble at all. Before my audience with the emperor, they even gave me a few pointers, reminding me to watch my words and actions. Clearly, someone had made arrangements in advance. My thanks were sincere. The irritation in Lu Yun's eyes softened. After a long while, he hesitated and said, if instinct told me whatever he said next would be earth-shattering. I abruptly stood up, nearly knocking over the stool. Lu Yun, having finally gained my freedom. I didn't want to marry again. Confined to the inner courtyard, only seeing a square patch of sky. A flash of loneliness passed through his eyes, long lashes concealing countless thoughts. When he spoke again, it actually carried mockery. What are you thinking? I meant, what if I raised your wages? He was already saving face. Only his hand in his sleeve clenched into a fist, yet couldn't grasp anything. I called to him again. Lu Yun. His expression was far from pleasant. He gave a vague response. I said sincerely, being in the Jinyu way, you can't avoid braving wind and rain. Don't drink unboiled water on the road. If you get injured, remember to seek treatment promptly. The Jinyu way looks imposing, but offends many people too. From now on, inside and out, keep your guard up somewhat. Lu Yun waved his hand, his tone none too pleasant. You still have time to worry about me. The Grand Princess has elevated you, but you need to hold that position steady yourself. If you don't want to do it anymore, just come back. I, Lu Yun, can still afford to support you. Thank you. I smiled again, the sunlight pleasant, leaning my body back, resting against the chair. The clear sky was blue as if washed clean. The vegetation lush like clouds, swallows flew past in rows. A piece of letter paper folded into a butterfly, fluttering gracefully in the wind. I don't know if life as a female official will be good or not, but since I struggled so hard to break free from the inner quarters, I have to give it a try. Only then will this trip not be in vain.